Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Sophie Louie.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with the race to contain highly contagious new variants while rolling out vaccines to protect us from COVID-19. In Canada, that rollout is not going as first planned. In the last 2 weeks, vaccine supplies have slowed to a trickle while variants keep spreading. New variants have now been detected in 6 provinces. At least 195 cases have been confirmed. The full extent of the spread is not certain because Canada's capacity to screen for variants is limited. The clock is ticking, and these highly transmissible new variants will not wait for more tests or for public health officials and political leaders to decide how to try to contain them.
If those variants achieve dominance, viral dominance in Alberta, all of our current public health measures would be totally inadequate to contain it. And all of the sacrifices that we have made as a society and every Albertan individually would be overwhelmed.
Yet Alberta and some other provinces are preparing to lift some public health restrictions. At the same time, the government is struggling to get vaccine doses into the country and into the arms of Canadians. Here's how Canada compares to other G7 countries with mass vaccination programs. According to Our World in Data project, as of Monday, Canada had administered just over 2.5 doses per 100 people. The UK had administered nearly 15 doses per 100 people. The government says Canada is still on track to get 6 million doses of the Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines by the end of March. Canada is also expecting more than 1 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is not yet approved for use. The supply is coming through the COVAX program, which was set up primarily to help low-income countries access vaccines. Canada is one of the few wealthy countries which contributed to the program and has now opted to dip into the supply in the first round of distribution. That will not help Canada right now, and as Heather Yourex-West reports, there is evidence the variants are already spreading through the community, and the window to try to contain them has already closed.
It was a concerning development in Alberta that prompted an immediate change of policy. Despite all efforts to contain it, students at 2 Calgary schools and an Alberta daycare have now been exposed to the more transmissible variant first detected in the UK, after returning travelers passed the virus to their kids.
One of the themes we are seeing in Alberta, and one that has been reported in other places, is that it can be more difficult to effectively quarantine or isolate away from other household members with variant strains of COVID.
Returning travelers are now being asked to quarantine at a hotel. If they do not, all household contacts must quarantine for 24 days.
Even if we cannot contain it 100%, we need to slow it.
Because there is so much about these new variants that we still don't know. Like if current COVID-19 safety protocols in schools will be enough to prevent viral spread. Though now that there's been exposures, we'll soon find out.
With this, more or less, this amount of the new UK variant that we already have in community, it will become dominant around March 7th.
This University of Calgary researcher says mathematical models suggest in Alberta containment is just too late. But Alberta and other provinces are moving forward with reopening plans anyways, though Alberta's premier admits that businesses opening next week could have to close again.
I know no one wants to be on the roller coaster, but we cannot guarantee people that there won't be a change of policy in the future.
Because as cases of the new variant spread, much of what we've come to know about living with COVID-19 may need to change. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Testing, as always, is key to tracking the spread of the virus. These new variants require another level of testing beyond the basic COVID test. It's called genomic sequencing, and it's being ramped up across the country. Sorensen explains how and why.
We've counted on a simple formula to get us beyond COVID-19, a lockdown to hold it down, then vaccinate to eradicate. The new COVID variants have shaken up that outlook.
We're in a very delicate period right now.
This virus evolves and changes over time.
Even with small numbers so far, the mutations are so much more transmissible that provinces are making changes.
We have stepped up our surveillance. We are monitoring and testing.
British Columbia has begun random sampling in targeted areas, such as this school in Maple Ridge and at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver, after cases of variants were found. BC and others, like Alberta and Ontario, are testing a percentage of positive COVID-19 results looking for mutations. And they are genomic sequencing some to identify specific variants. Quebec has announced an $11 million investment to sequence 65,000 positive samples for emerging variants by year-end.
It's clearly the right path to proceed with caution with these variants. And even though we see case numbers dropping in much of Canada, it's going to be harder and harder to keep that same trajectory if that variant is spreading.
Indeed, COVID-19 numbers are coming down. Provinces are looking to reopen schools and the economy, but the variants inject new uncertainty.
As schools open, we want to know, are schools going to be accelerating the pandemic? In particular, are they going to be accelerating the penetration of the new variants? We only know that if we do surveillance, and surveillance includes testing.
The variants have accelerated the urgency for vaccinations. COVID-19 has spread in the population from one person to the next and then on to many more. From all the infections eventually came mutations. Vaccines can protect the remaining population from the original COVID-19 virus. They may also limit the impact of the variants. Plus, mass vaccination removes an enormous pool of potential infections from which more mutations could develop.
Viruses cannot mutate if they don't replicate. And if you stop their replication by vaccinating widely, you will not get mutations.
But with vaccine deliveries to Canada stalled by the manufacturers and the growth of variants still an unknown, there are no easy decisions for governments or Canadian health officials. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Well, one of the highly transmissible variants has already spread through a senior's home in Ontario with deadly consequences. Today, the Ontario government admitted it will miss its deadline to get the first dose of vaccine to all long-term care residents and other vulnerable people. One part of containing the spread of the variants is restricting travel. As Ross Lord explains, experts say Canada should have acted long ago.
You're always on edge all the time.
These are terrifying times for Debbie Grigg. Following the Christmas holidays, her 75-year-old mother, Evelyn, contracted COVID-19. The variant first found in the UK is tearing through her long-term care home in Barrie, Ontario. In less than a month, more than 60 residents have died.
My greatest fear is getting that phone call saying that my mother has passed away. It's, I think that's why I don't sleep most of the nights.
The suspected cause of the outbreak is travel. Health officials say it proves again how critical it is for people to stay at home. But researchers say containing the spread of COVID-19 variants will take more coordination than Canada has shown so far.
So there are different levels of jurisdiction, different policies across provinces. There's not a joined up whole of government approach to this.
The Public Health Agency of Canada says it's up to provincial and other health officials to warn travelers directly they might have been exposed to COVID-19 on commercial flights. But Quebec's Department of Health and Social Services said there is no individual follow-up with potentially exposed travelers, and that they are responsible for checking the Government of Canada website to see if a case of COVID was subsequently detected on their flight and to follow the Quarantine Act. Since the start of the pandemic, there have been more than 8.5 million border crossings into Canada. Canada Border Services says 74% of those crossings, or 6.3 million, were by people exempted from quarantine measures because they were considered essential. There's renewed pressure on the federal government to make sure its new travel rules work.
I think this should have been done months ago.
This epidemiologist suggests Canada is playing catch-up with the highly contagious new variants.
How much can we vaccinate before it becomes dominant? Can we harden our long-term care centers? Can we protect our healthcare workers? Can we be in a position to prevent a likely third wave in the late spring?
The new variants are not unstoppable. Almost 2 weeks after Nova Scotia reported cases from both the UK variant and the one first detected in South Africa, there's been no new outbreak. Health authorities credit the tedious but effective methods most Canadians have followed for almost a year. and will be asked to continue practicing for the foreseeable future. Ross Lord, Global News.
Students and parents in Ontario found out today most of the province's shuttered schools will reopen to in-person learning on Monday. Elementary and secondary schools in 13 public health units in southern Ontario will return to the classroom February 8th. Those in the province's COVID-19 hotspots, Toronto, Peel Region and York Region, will resume in-person learning February 16th. Before and after school childcare programs will also resume on those same days. The newly retired Chief of the Defense Staff, General Jonathan Vance, is being investigated after Global News reported allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior. Vance stepped down from the military's top job last month, but remains a member of the forces. Mercedes Stevenson broke this story and joins us now with new developments. Mercedes.
Sophie, an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, has come forward to Global News saying she is the woman who General Jonathan Vance carried on an intimate relationship with during his time as CDS, as well as while she was under his command in 2006. Vance has denied the relationship was sexual during either of those time periods. Global News has agreed to protect the woman's identity. The woman has alleged that the two exchanged sexually explicit messages and have had an intimate relationship on and off since 2001. Since Global News began asking questions, the female officer alleges that General Vance has called her repeatedly. She told Global News, "I know of at least 4 phone calls that I answered that he dictated to me testimony and what to say and what not to say. Repeatedly, he told me what I was allowed to say and what I was not allowed to say." The woman also alleges Vance told her to say they did not have sex because it's true, but she says she won't do that. Due to fears over abuse of authority of the command relationship in the military, subordinates in the chain of command are not allowed to have a relationship with superiors.
If General Vance at any material time during a relationship had any authority over that other person's rank progression, evaluation, or career decision-making, then that's going to give rise to what's referred to as an adverse relationship.
All right, Mercedes, what's next for Vance?
While the woman told Global News that she has identified herself to the chain of command as the woman in our story, and military sources confirm that. Under military rules, this will likely trigger an investigation. "I fear situations like these erode the trust you have in leadership," said Admiral Art MacDonald in a message to Canadian forces. He is the new CDS. What that investigation that he is promising looks like is unclear. It is unprecedented for someone of such a high rank to face this kind of an investigation, but DND is pledging it will be independent. Global News has learned that high-ranking government officials were aware of concerns about potentially inappropriate behavior by the CDS as early as 2018. They say that they reported those concerns to the Privy Council office.
All right, thanks for that, Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. The Proud Boys are declared terrorists in Canada. Coming up, the implications for the far-right group and anyone who wants to join it. An American company's facial recognition technology clearly violated federal and provincial privacy laws, according to Canada's Privacy Commissioner. His report found Clearview AI subjected Canadians to illegal mass surveillance. Daniel Therrien says the company collected highly sensitive biometric information without the knowledge or consent of individuals. Clearview AI amassed and analyzed billions of images of faces people posted to popular social media sites. It sold software or offered trials of it to multiple police forces in the U.S. and Canada. Therrien calls the company's behavior completely unacceptable.
It is an affront to individuals' privacy rights and inflicts broad-based harm on all members of society who find themselves continually in a police lineup.
Clearview AI stopped offering its services in Canada last year in response to the investigation. Class action lawsuits and other government privacy investigations are underway around the world. Clearview AI denies breaking any laws in Canada or anywhere else. The company says taking and analyzing photographs that people publicly post on the internet is not an invasion of privacy. The Canadian government has designated 13 new groups as terrorist entities, including, most notably, the Proud Boys. Canada is the first country in the world to add them to this kind of list. The decision will freeze assets and make it illegal to contribute to groups labeled a serious terror threat. Abigail Beeman takes a look at what it all means.
The Proud Boys, central to the deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol. The Canadian government says the event contributed to their intelligence and decision, but they've been watching the group for much longer.
They're saying the authorities know that these individuals have actually engaged in really concrete planning or conspiring to do something violent.
The Proud Boys is one of 13 groups added to Canada's list of terrorist entities and one of 4 the government describes as ideologically motivated violent extremist groups. The others include 3 Daesh and 5 Al-Qaeda affiliates.
No matter the ideological motivation of violent extremist groups, they are all hateful, intolerant, and as we have seen, they can be dangerous.
We were at great risk. Let nobody make any mistake about this. This is not 10 years ago. This is at a time where anything can happen. These groups were planning all kinds of nonsense. And this will allow police to do the work that they have to do in order to shut them down.
Simply being a member of one of these groups isn't illegal, but with financial assets frozen, experts say a listing can mean big consequences.
All financial organizations, real estate groups, any kind of group that would have any kind of interactions with the Proud Boys, for example, for organizing meetings or providing logistical support or transfers of money, holding of property, all these kinds of things. Now these groups will have to disassociate themselves.
The public safety minister stresses this isn't about politics, but last week MPs voted unanimously in favor of the NDP's motion to add the Proud Boys to the list.
We need to change our approach with the outcome of dismantling these groups.
There are as many as 300 white supremacist violence groups that exist in Canada that pose an existential threat to Canadians. We need to be seeing action on those groups as well. But it was an important step today.
Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
Still ahead, a destructive fire hits homes outside of Perth, Australia.
Ready, man.
An out-of-control bushfire keeps raging in Western Australia. Hundreds more people had to make a last-minute dash to safety, fleeing their homes on the outskirts of Perth. The city is back in lockdown after the first case of COVID-19 in months was detected there. And the fierce, fast-moving fire doubled in size overnight. It's the biggest the city has seen in years. 11,000 hectares have burned and 71 homes have been lost. Many more are in danger as relentless winds keep fanning the flames. In Russia, independent monitors of the police estimate 10,000 people have been taken into custody since opposition leader Alexei Navalny was arrested. And after his prison sentence yesterday, riot police cracked down again. Demonstrations in Moscow and St. Petersburg were beaten back. Riot police appeared to grab protesters without obvious provocation, throwing them into police vehicles. Journalists have been arrested too, and human rights groups say some people are unaccounted for. The Kremlin calls the protests illegal and unauthorized and accuses the West of descending into hysteria over Navalny's imprisonment. He was sentenced to 3.5 years in a penal colony, a case Navalny says was fabricated and politically motivated. Well, after the military coup in Myanmar, also known as Burma, police have now charged the country's elected civilian leader. Aung San Suu Kyi has been charged with possessing illegally imported walkie-talkies. It gives military leaders a legal reason to hold her until at least the middle of this month. Suu Kyi has not been heard from since the military coup February 1st. The general who seized power has imposed a year-long state of emergency. One for the books. Next, why a Vancouver couple stocked up the library shelves at a local school. Well, who doesn't need this in their lives? A dose of baby pandas. 10 of them wiggling their way through their first photo shoot at China's leading panda reserve. Their debut is to mark the coming Lunar New Year. In 9 days, the Year of the Ox begins. The cubs range in age from 4 to 6 months. China prides itself on its efforts to preserve a species that was endangered for many years. Acts of kindness are another thing we could all use more of these days. This next story is about a Canadian couple who made some quick cash playing the stock market and decided to share the wealth. Robin Gill has their story.
The Pulp Fiction bookstore in Vancouver is in the business of bestsellers, but owner Chris Brayshaw may have a real page-turner. It begins when two benevolent book lovers came into the store. They had bet $5,000 on AMC stock. When they woke up the next day, they doubled their money.
He said, I started thinking about some way that my windfall could benefit, some other people in the community.
They offered the store $1,000 to buy books for a school in the neighborhood.
Kind of felt a little guilty, as he said to me, I didn't really work or do anything for this.
Well, parents at the local school were carrying out a book drive to update the library. The students come from all kinds of backgrounds, and their parents felt they just weren't represented in the pages.
With libraries, especially when they're working with a small budget, is they have the books that they have. They replace the books when they can, but they really have this kind of collection that is not current.
This windfall will go a long way, buying up to 200 new books. The donors want to stay anonymous, instead authoring this statement. Give random people some extra money and they donate to charities. Give billionaires extra money and they'll just store it with all the other money that they'll never get around to spending. It's not money I deserved, so I'm just sharing the luck.
It's a really beautiful thing.
The parents can't believe their luck.
That someone would take this, this fortune that they had and spread it around is, it is really amazing. And it just really is a testament to the kind of community that we have here.
As for our storyteller, Chris Brayshaw, he hopes others will subscribe to this kind of good.
Anyone can duplicate this experience.
It's the kind of story that really does have a happy ending. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Sophie Louis. Tonight's Your Canada is this elk in East Bolton, Quebec. There are beautiful places all over Canada. Please email us yours to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Robin Gill will be here tomorrow.